We're good?
Mr. Mayor and members of council, we're just starting the live stream and the recording. And I believe we were up and running. If the deputy clerk just wants to double check on the live stream. It's usually about a 2-minute delay. Members of council, we're just checking the live stream, and I believe that everything is all set to go. Mr. McDonald has advised, so I believe we are ready to go, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I see on the screen that we have every councillor present. We have quorum, so I call to order this regular meeting of council for Tuesday, September 8th. It was supposed to start at 5:30. We apologize to all residents who were waiting for us. We had an in-camera meeting before this meeting began, and that meeting ran over somewhat. So we're just starting 20 minutes late, but we're ready to go now. Thank you for bearing with us. Approval of the agenda, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the agenda for the September 8th, 2020 regular meeting of council be adopted. I am aware that one member of council would like to make an amendment to the agenda, and that is Councillor Hildebrand.
And go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment and add an item under the new business, item 12. I would like council to consider a motion pertaining to the 2021 budget schedule. A motion to be presented for consideration by council. I also have requested that the clerk read the motion at that time on my behalf.
So this is a notice of motion then, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the member is asking that the agenda be amended to include a motion to be presented under new business, and he is also presenting a motion to dispense with notice requirements for that notice of motion. I have both prepared by the councillor.
I see. But that is not the correct order of business. This, normally, this would have to have a notice of motion brought forward, and then the motion is in 2 weeks, is it not?
Through Mr. Mayor, the normal course would be to have the motion either printed on the agenda or to present it as a notice of motion. Then the motion is then considered at the next regular meeting. The councillor has asked that we also consider a motion to dispense with those notice requirements so as to permit the motion pertaining to the 2021 budget schedule to be presented on this evening's agenda. That's the item that he wishes added to tonight's agenda. That's this amendment to the agenda motion.
Yes. Do we vote on this?
So we need a seconder to amend the agenda to add that item of new business. And I see Councillor Hahn's hand is raised. So then there is a vote to be called on the motion to amend the agenda.
Okay. First of all, should we discuss this? Is there a discussion on this, please? Not seeing any discussion, then I'll have the clerk call the vote.
So this is on amending the agenda, and the first voter is Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes?
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
No.
The motion carries. If you'd like to call for any further amendments to the agenda?
Yeah. Is there any other further amendments to the agenda put forward by any councillors? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
So on the agenda as amended, Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes?
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
The motion to adopt the agenda as amended carries unanimously. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Any councillor, after viewing the agenda, have a pecuniary interest to declare? Not seen any. Please, Madam Clerk, take note of that. And the next on the agenda is presentations. Back to the clerk.
The first presentation listed on the agenda is the COVID-19 update by the Community Emergency Management Coordinator, Fire Chief Limburner.
Okay, Chief, you're on.
Evening, Mayor, Council, Senior Leadership Team, and residents. Just a quick update on what's happening on the COVID front. Pelham still has 41 total cases, 0 active cases in town as of today. There are 6 other municipalities in the region that have 0 active cases. Across the region, we've had 948 total cases, currently have 16 active cases. We've had 868 resolved, which is getting on closer to 92% of all cases resolved, and we're still at 64 deaths. Across the province, we've had a spike in a few areas, predominantly in Peel, Toronto, and Ottawa. We're at 43,546 with 39,196 resolved and 2,813 deaths. Across the country are about 132,000 cases, 116,000 of those resolved. Our case doubling time in the region is at 508 days. Our reproduction rate in the region is 1.3. Infection spread is 47% males and 53% females. Predominantly, the problem we're having across the province is our younger generation, predominantly 20 to 29-year-olds. They represent most of the cases. We have 0 new outbreaks in the region. We've resolved 38 old outbreaks. And the number one contributing factor for spread is close contact. About 62% of cases are a result of close contact. The town continues active screening. We continued at MCC, Town Hall, all the fire stations at Tice Road. Some of the questions have been revised this week as per Public Health's request. The MCC opened the walking track today. It requires you to book a time. It's restricted to the amount of time, and you're required to wear a mask at all times. No running, just walking on the track. Junior hockey will start to practice tomorrow in the Exhibit Arena. Looks like there's a possibility that they might start a league in the new year in January. Just this past week, the first of 3 voting days was completed by our clerk's department without incident. It went off very well with all our safety procedures in place. Our PPE supplies are very healthy. There's no worries in anything we have. And unfortunately, today the province announced that they're going to put a 4-week hold on any further openings or any considerations of openings across the province. If some of the centers continue to do what they're doing, they could find themselves back to stage 2 if numbers don't slow down. So that's basically my report. If anybody has any questions.
Before going to council, one question for you, Chief. And I didn't go to the website today, and don't mean to put you on the spot. Is there? I know there hasn't been any hospitalizations of C-19s for quite a while in the region. Did that change over the weekend? Do you know? Again, I apologize for not giving you a heads up.
No, wait, actually, I get that. We received that update on Fridays, and as of the past Friday, we had only had one case hospitalized, and that was a week and a half ago. So in the past week, I have not been aware of any.
Okay, thank you. And to council, Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, Chief, just wondering if it's possible for, and I guess this also would speak to our communications person too, if it's possible for any communication pieces that show, like in the newspaper or on our website, people walking the track. It really should reflect the social distancing that we're asking them to do. I think if we're preaching something, we got to make sure that we're actively demonstrating in our advertising the same thing.
Yeah, Councillor, you're absolutely correct here, Mr. Mayor. That was brought up in our EOC meeting this morning, and those corrections have been made. The new picture will have the participants wearing masks on the track. It was our oversight on our parts. Apologize for that, but you make a very good point.
Thanks.
Councillor Hildebrand, was that your question, or have you got another one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the fire chief, does that mean both ice pads have been opened up to ice rentals?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We've both ice pads have been rented for Director Vicky would have to answer the exact dates on that, but both rinks have been open to hockey, figure skating, and rentals for a couple weeks now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, both ice pads have been open since July the 28th. The original one was July the 8th, and then we went to July the 28th. And we are open now. Of course, today is the first day of school, so today wasn't fully booked, but we do have rentals from AAA, Junior B, also private rentals. And these are continuing on both pads. The private rentals will be cut back when minor hockey begins, which that tentative date is September the 14th, which is next Monday. They will be confirming that tomorrow as they have a meeting going on tomorrow night. But we fully expect to be fully booked as usual in the next coming months.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, for the Director of Recreation, today was the first day. Did we actually have people on the track, or was today the first day that you could book it? Did we have people on the track today, or were they booking today?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we did accept people coming in through the door, and we did have people on the track.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you. Any other questions for the fire chief? Not seen any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. On a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur, be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from B. Limburner, Fire Chief and Community Emergency Management Coordinator, for information. If there is no further discussion or questions, I'll call the vote, starting with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Carried unanimously, Mr. Mayor. The next item on the agenda is the Corporate Administration COVID-19 update from the Chief Administrative Officer.
Mr. Cribbs, you have the floor. And I believe you're muted.
You missed good evening. So I want to make sure I don't hit off anything that Ms. Van Ravensway, the chief, did. Highlights we can give you are that at this point in time, our July and August rental revenue for both pads and the gymnasiums is roughly $172,000. So that's a very strong, in normal conditions, we would consider that an extremely strong summer. And as far as future programming goes, we have some dates we are targeting now for the following activities. Stick and puck programs somewhere during the week of September 27th, so towards the end of the month. Shinny also the week of September 27th. Public skating also the week of September 27th. Ladies Learn to Play Hockey will commence September 21. Seniors Learn to Skate October 19. Brock University will start its fitness classes up September 28th. Seniors Fitness somewhere during the week of October 4th. Chair Yoga somewhere also during the week of October 4th. Pickleball on or about the 28th of September. So those are our target dates for those various services. Lots of diligent work by Ms. Van Ravensway and her entire team, both to get the facilities ready and, of course, to logistically figure out how to offer those and come up with timeframes. So quite happy with that, and I hope it serves the community well.
Okay, thank you for that report. Any questions to the CAO from any councillors? Not seen any. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn, be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. Starting with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried unanimously, Mr. Mayor. The next item on the agenda is the report of the Regional Councillor Hewson for the September 8th, 2020. And our Deputy Clerk will share the screen now so as to display the Regional Councillor's presentation for the viewing public.
Okay, Ms. Houston, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Clerk. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to my report today. Just wait for the view. Can you bring up the presentation view, Holly? Oh, perfect. Okay, so hi. I think you can go to the next slide. I think everyone knows the report. So I just highlighted what I'm going to cover in the report today. It basically covers 6 key items of conversation topics, being the attention that the Niagara Regional Police Services have gotten lately in their presentation to Council, the Natural Environmental Work Program that's being undertaken by our Planning Department. I myself brought a childcare motion forward to Council, which was almost unanimously approved. We had a KPMG sustainability review that dove into our services and programming. The AMO conference was also a couple of weeks, and I had the privilege of being able to attend, albeit in a remote setting, and a reminder on the changes that are coming forward with regards to waste management. So the first item that I wanted to discuss was the presentation delivered by Chief McCullough and Tara McKendrick from the Canadian Mental Health Association that spoke to the NRP's culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've listed off all of the topics that were included in their presentation. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I did want to point out the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team, and there was a family from Pelham who actually brought a delegation forward to talk about this and to talk about the deficiencies of this program. It's actually a really great program where the NRP responds to mental health calls alongside a mental health professional from the Canadian Mental Health Association. But that program is dependent on funding from the province, and currently there's funding to provide the program in St. Catharines and Forals only. So when we did pass our motion asking for the police to look into how they could look at some of the issues that have been brought forward by some of the Black Lives Matter movement, one of the things that I asked them for was to perhaps explore a way that we could creatively address the deficiency of this service in that it's only offered in certain municipalities, and that doesn't include Pelham, for a potential to expanding that service. Because I do feel that mental health calls have really escalated. It's created a significant, I'm going to say, drain on police resourcing, in that they've needed more officers to respond to the volume of calls. So it's a big issue, and it's something that we need to address. Can you advance, Holly, please? So on to the Natural Environmental Work Program. This is working towards establishing a direction for the natural heritage system and also the water resource system. We're on phase 4, identification and evaluation of options. And this really represents moving away from a feature-based planning approach to our natural systems to one that is recognized more a systems approach, where we understand that, you know, these green spaces don't exist in isolation from one another. Often they're connected to one another, and as an example, wildlife are traveling in between them. So those identifying that those linkages are important aspects of our natural heritage is an important part of building this natural heritage plan. And this is a result of a requirement of the province that we need to do this. And the province has set minimum standards in terms of what that should look like. But we're examining if we were even to go beyond that minimum standards, and how we can protect and preserve some significant areas in Niagara. Holly, can you move on to the next slide? So this is just a section as an example of what the natural heritage system could look like, and this one really represents those minimum standards. But you can see that most of these areas are actually connected, a lot of them through waterways. Can you move on to the next one? So this is if we were to take an even, if we were to take an approach that is beyond those minimum expectations, what this natural plan could look like. And you can see that there's definitely enhancement of the green spaces, but also an enhancement of those linkages that I mentioned. So this is something that's in progress. It's in a conceptual phase in terms of us exploring what this looks like. We're still getting public consultation and feedback. I'm sure landowners will want to participate and give feedback on what this looks like. But I do think it's an exciting aspect of some environmental planning that our planning committee or our planning department has been working on. Next slide, please. So this is my childcare motion. I brought this forward at our last meeting. I'm not going to read it out entirely, but I'd like to skip just to the actual the ask. Next slide, Holly. So what I asked was that the Niagara region requests that the Government of Ontario prioritize children in childcare as part of our overall post-pandemic recovery, that they develop, adequately fund, and release publicly a comprehensive plan, and that they work with the Government of Canada on collaboratively to develop a national childcare strategy to make childcare an essential part of our public infrastructure. And I also asked that the motion be circulated to upper and single tier municipalities who are designated by the province as municipal service providers for childcare, and to local area MPPs and MPs I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm happy to talk about it more, but it's really to recognize how essential childcare is as an economic tool. And there's been a lot of attention spent on back to school planning, but there's also a lot of children who are not yet of school age, who families need childcare for, or even children that need before or after care that can help families be able to have more household income by having both parents work. So this is really about trying to recognize the importance of childcare as an economic policy, and getting the government to pay attention to it in terms of how do we build back better from in a post-pandemic world. Next slide, please. And the sustainability review. So I know that some of you might want to talk about this one. We did have KPMG come in to do a review on our services to try and look at how we compare with other municipalities. They highlighted that we will continue to be challenged on a long-term basis in terms of our sustainability by a number of different things like regulatory changes, our infrastructure reinvestment requirements, our operating costs. The point that they brought up was that there does not appear to be an affordability issue with respect to upper and lower tier taxation. A high proportion of our services are either mandatory or essential, and we learned this very quickly during the pandemic, in that where some of the municipalities were able to put a hold on some of their employment, like with respect to recreation. We found out that over 80% of our services were actually mandatory, and we had to increase costs to deal with some employment issues, or we had to increase costs to deal with the need for extra cleaning service or the PPE, as I'm sure you guys had to do too. But they also looked at the level of our service and considered it to be at standard. They also found that our operating costs were generally consistent with other municipalities, and where the differences did exist, they were primarily due to differences in scope. So they showed a number of different indicators that helped demonstrate some of the points that they wanted to make about in reviewing the region. Holly, can you please? Thank you. So I think this speaks to the comment that was made about affordability. If we look at Niagara compared to some of the other municipalities, we can see that we are right along that municipal average. Our taxation is, I'm going to use the word appropriate in consideration of household income. They did look at us from a consolidated tax perspective. They did not separate the region's taxes versus the municipality's taxes. So they looked at us as a whole. So we can see where, as an example, Hamilton is actually taxing at a higher level over the average, and Waterloo is taxing at under the average, whereas Niagara falls almost right on that municipal average line. Next slide, please. And this was just an overview of some of the things that I already spoke about, where we found out pretty quickly that our majority of our services were either mandatory or essential, that our operating expenditures, the majority of them also went towards those mandatory and essential services. And then even looking at our employees, there was, most of our employees are dedicated to those mandatory and essential services. So that if we were to stand back and look at the big picture, I think what they're trying to say is there isn't a lot of fat there, that the organization is quite lean. So if we want to look at ways where we can be more efficient or more effective in our service delivery, we have to get more creative in terms of looking at what we do and how we do it. Next slide, please. And this speaks pretty much to what I just stated. They also found that our reserves and our reserve funds per household were the second lowest. Hence, we don't have a lot of funds put away for a rainy day. We also have a higher level of household debt, long-term debt per household. And we haven't spent a lot of money on our capital requirements. So these are all challenges that we're going to face moving forward in terms of identifying how we can improve upon the organization. Next slide. So when we stand back and consider all of these things, what really became apparent is if we want to look at ways we can improve upon our services and our programming, we have to get really creative in terms of looking at ways we can partner with our municipalities. And I know Pelham has already done this in some regard, but I think the region will be putting something together. I know that the CAO group has been meeting, I think, for almost 2 years. I think they were waylaid a bit by the pandemic, but I fully expect that they'll be rejoining the discussions on this, because there is an interest of council in looking at how we can integrate some of our service delivery, perhaps if there's an opportunity for some type of amalgamation of service. How can we cut some of that discretionary services that we are offering, or is there an alternate service delivery that we could perhaps explore that could help even lean out the organization a bit more? Next slide. And the AMO conference, I did have the opportunity to attend the AMO conference in August. The Ministers Forum, I don't know if all of you have been, but the Ministers Forum is really interesting because there's an opportunity for delegates, which would include, I'm assuming, not only councillors, but staff, to submit questions. I noticed there were a lot of questions around how women were impacted in a different way from the pandemic economically, but also, from that childcare or child rearing perspective. The education, kids going back to school, that was a very important topic, and the childcare issue came up quite a bit. It was the first time they also offered a women's leadership forum, so they had a really interesting session on that. And I also attended a session on green recovery, and it really talked about the opportunity for active transportation and the interest in, or the level of interest that people have in terms of wanting to rely more on active transportation as their primary mode instead of relying on cars. So I found that one really interesting. They really talked about, there was an enhanced dialogue around the importance of broadband internet and the rural and urban divide, and how important that is now that I think it's 39% of Canada is now telecommuting, and how, having access to reliable internet is important for people working from home, or even being able to get their kids to be able to do schoolwork from home. And there was a significant interest on that shift of the recycling responsibility to producers, and a lot of questions about how that's going to roll out. So I think, the forum is, or the event is really important, not only from a professional development perspective, but it also good to see how the other issues that communities are dealing with, and how, a lot of the issues that impact our communities are important across other communities, and that some of the things that we're going through or experiencing are not so unique. So it's great to connect with other people and see what they're doing perhaps differently, or the initiatives that they've started, or the ideas that they have to try and address some of the issues that our residents are concerned about. Next slide, please. Oh, and finally, another aspect of the AMO conference was there was a declaration of mutual commitment and friendship on behalf of AMO and the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres. The region did commit to signing on to this. And so I guess overall the motion just aimed to set a leading example in the area of Indigenous Relations, and was, I believe, was circulated to municipalities. But I think, you know, there's a lot of attention being spent on the different groups within our community and how we can listen or perhaps make things better for those groups that perhaps experience life differently than some of us. Next slide, please. And then finally, the reminder about the waste management collection changes. The organics and the recycling will continue to be weekly, but the bi-weekly services for garbage, which is those items that are going into the landfill, will be changing on October 19th. There was also a change with regards to the illegal dumping, where the fine increased from $500 to $1,000, based on concerns about potentially an escalation of illegal dumping once that policy comes into place. Next slide. And is there any questions?
Thank you for that very thorough report, Ms. Houston. Before we open it to council, I'd like to make two comments. Number one, I'd just like to inform this council that your motion on childcare was very well received from the council at Niagara Region. I believe out of all the representatives, there was only one representative that failed to back it. So it was very well received by the representatives. If I could just add that on the waste management front, big information blitz is going to start in 1 week, September 14th, in the media and social media. They're going to be informing the residents that the region is going to have an app that you can download, and it can have all kinds of information as to what it goes into blue boxes, green boxes, gray boxes. You can download the schedule that's going to be on every other week now, of course, for your garbage. And it's going to fill in a lot of gaps and answer a lot of questions that I believe the residents have. Anyway, I'm done. Any questions that any councillors have for the report? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Diana, for your excellent report. You probably know that I'm the regional tax guy. And the last time you were there, I questioned you with regards to the regional tax report that we received on April 23rd, which said the first year of the new assessment cycle, which is 2023, based on the information, the residential tax is anticipated to experience a 50% increase in the tax factor. Fast forwarding, in August 20th, Regional Council approved a report by KPMG on sustainability, and the Niagara Independent summarized the heading this way: Region told residents can afford higher taxes, and that was the summary they gave us. Please give me your comment based on this observation that the Independent made, because really, they're saying the residents can afford higher taxes.
Yeah, so my comment on that is the headline is sensationalized. If you look back at the presentation, the words "the region can afford higher taxes" was never part of that presentation. The words were, let me just reiterate this: there doesn't appear to be an affordability issue with respect to upper and lower tier taxation. So I disagree with the generalization that means Niagara residents can afford more taxation. I don't believe that was the message that council received. I don't believe that was the message that we would have been receptive to. I believe that our council is actually very mindful of taxation and taxpayer dollars, especially in consideration of the pandemic and how we know a number of families are struggling with dual income loss. We have entire sectors that are particularly hit hard. I don't think the region is receptive to increasing taxes based on that presentation. I think that we'll be very careful about what our budget looks like next year.
Thank you. That was my concern, that the region was concerned about tax increases.
Yeah, and I will let you know, I did call the author of that article and tell him I disagreed with that generalization. And I noticed he did add some quotations from what was actually the wording that was actually used in that presentation, but I still don't think it accurately reflects the message that we received in that presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on a motion by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Wink, be it resolved that the September 8th, 2020 report of Regional Councillor Hughson be received for information. This vote starts with Councillor Wink.
Sorry, yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Excuse me.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Houston.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. Moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. C13, 2020, regular council minutes of the August 20... Sorry, the motion just didn't include the date. So the August 24th meeting, regular council minutes of August 24th.
Any questions or omissions that were spotted by any councillor going through these minutes? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. For the vote, Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
I'm going to abstain. I was not at that meeting.
Thank you. And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Motion carries. I don't have any business arising from council minutes listed. Are there any requests to lift agenda items from the consent agenda for separate consideration, meaning that they would be looking for a different motion than in what was presented?
Any councillor wish to lift an item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the September 8th, 2020 council agenda be received and recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. And they dealt with a staff report with regard to the 2020 debenture update and information correspondence from M. Hughes with regard to the rezoning of 1307 Hayes Street and the Meridian Community Center user group minutes of August 13th. So if you'd like to call for discussion or questions.
Any discussion or questions? Oh, I see Councillor Hildebrand. Go ahead, Councillor.
I'd like a question for the treasurer with regard to the debenture update. Question I have, can you please explain the breakdown of donations and pledges and reserve funds scheduled so that there's no impact on taxes in 2021 for the $240,000 needed? And the second question I have is, what is the effect on taxes for 2022 and beyond to meet this requirement? And how is the amount to be paid?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to paying the interest and principal portion of almost $241,000 for 2021, that will be covered by donations in that year. Currently, we're projecting by the end of December 31st, 2020, the reserve, we have Meridian Community Center Reserve, and that will be approximately $349,000, and that includes some of the donations going in this year. So between the donations coming in and the reserve that we have, we don't anticipate any taxes we don't anticipate using the tax levy to cover the interest and principals of this $3.4 million debenture for the years 2021, 22, 23, and 24. So for the next 4 years, we are not going to be including these amounts as part of the tax levy increase. Starting in 2025, we will start to we will need a bit of the tax levy to cover this. And, you know, in 2025, it's going to be about 0.4% of a tax levy increase. In 2026 is 0.8, then 0.9, 0.9, 0.9, 0.9, and then 2031, it's a 1% increase, and then it goes to 1.3 in 2033. This debenture is a 20-year debenture. It finishes in 2040. So the last probably 13 years, there'll be a 1% tax increase for this debenture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does that that answers your questions, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hahn.
Through the Mayor, to the Director of Finance. With regards to the fact that we are very much in COVID, and I know that we've already asked and gotten several extensions on the debenture, and it's coming up on October, have we made one final ask considering the last ask we made, COVID wasn't a factor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Infrastructure Ontario has been extremely, I would say, generous with us. We were supposed to pay back the bridge loan by October of 2018, and at that point we didn't have any of the land sales, and the bridge loan was at $13.5 million. They gave us a 1-year extension at that time, and then so in 2019 we were able to show them the interest that we had from different folks in purchasing the lands, but the land sales were a little bit delayed due to some of the issues that we were facing, and they gave us another year extension. So they did tell us in April of 2020, where we were in the middle of the pandemic, that there were no more extensions. So I was able to stretch it out to October 1st of 2020, and that was the final extension. So they were very gracious to and very understanding with the issues that we were facing, and so we got a 2-year extension when normally they don't do that. So, you know, the other issue, when you read the report, you'll see that there was a parcel of land that was part of the original plan to sell for that revenue was to put towards the bridge loan, and council decided not to sell that land because we're looking to see whether we need that for parking. So that sort of changed the original plan of the community center, and that's where some of the cash became short. And then the other part that has caused the shortfall is that the initial plan for the community center was that the pledges, the donations, were to come in 5 years from the completion of the building, and we've got 2 or 3 major donations over a 25-year period, 20 to 25 years. So that's where there's a timing issue with the donations that has caused us to have that shortfall.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor? Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any, I return to the clerk.
So for the vote on the consent agenda, this one will start with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is under unfinished business, and it's with regard to the establishment of a municipal heritage committee. So we have a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that committee receive report 2020-055 and that council approve the terms of reference for the establishment of a municipal heritage advisory committee attached to the report, and that council direct staff to proceed with the advertisement for community members to apply for the municipal heritage advisory committee, and that the appointment of community members to the municipal heritage advisory committee occur after the temporary provincial and municipal coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic restrictions on meetings and advisory committees has been lifted. For you to call for discussion, Mr. Mayor.
Any, first of all, the councilors have brought forth the motion and seconded. Any comments on this? Yes, Councillor Hahn.
To the Mayor, so certainly I agree with the terms of reference. The only question I have there is essentially, unless I'm missing something, we are saying that we want to move forward, we want to have people submit applications, and then we're going to, in theory, sit on those applications and not make our selection until after we can, after, you know, COVID restrictions are lifted. Because that's such very much right now an unknown, I would propose that we would take submissions when we can after the COVID restrictions are lifted. Otherwise, people could be submitting because they have time. Their circumstances right now are going to be very different in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whenever that might be. So I think it would make more sense in my mind to ask people what their level of interest is and what the time factor is in dedication to a committee when we can actually make the selection. I'd like to hear from the other councillors on that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Not seen any. I call a vote, right?
Unless the councillor is looking for a response, the representative from the planning department is with us at the meeting, or if the CAO has anything additional to add.
Go ahead, Councillor Hahn first. Go ahead.
Okay, so the other councillors, I guess, aren't going to respond, but I guess then I would ask them, the CAO, why are we moving forward with something that we can't move forward on at this time? Would it not make more sense to ask people for their interest and their applications and we can then make the selection?
Well, my own opinion is, I guess the way the province is moving forward on having open meetings again, and the way that this council is probably only months away from perhaps having meetings in this building again, I would think myself that the time frame is not that far out of whack, that by the time we put this out, get community members. Myself, I don't think my personal feeling is I don't think that we're that far away from having the ability to have open meetings or closed meetings or people inside of a building, whichever way you want to look at it. I mean, you can already have 100 people in a building, so I think it's just a matter of time before we can start having committee meetings again and what have you. Perhaps that's what the rest of council is thinking. I don't know. Any comments on the councillors' comments? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Hahn. I'm thinking we should have the option to divide the motion where we accept the terms of reference and delay advertising until we're more confident about a date where we can actually move forward with this.
Okay. Madam Clerk, before I turn to the clerk, any other comments on this debate? Councillor Hildebrand.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Stewart and Councillor Hahn as well. I think I'd like to wait to advertise the positions once we're sure that the committee meetings can be held.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can we indeed, in fact, split the motion?
So the motion to divide is just a request. So I'm understanding that council wants to consider that council approve the terms of reference for the establishment of a municipal heritage advisory committee attached to the report. separate and apart from the rest of the motion.
Councillor Wink.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so I don't understand why we cannot establish this committee, have the people on the committee and continue doing Zoom meetings until they can be done in person. A lot of the other committees that we have in town are meeting through Zoom, so why wait?
Yes, I know the Garden Club Committee, they have Zoom meetings. It really isn't, I don't think of it as a reason not to move forward. That's my own personal judgment. Zoom is working well for everyone. We haven't had a Heritage Committee for whatever, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I guess. I really don't see, myself personally, I'm willing to go ahead and put this out in the community. I think there's a need for it, but that's only me. Yes, Councillor Hahn.
Mayor, so if we're thinking about having Zoom meetings, and that means we're in a position then to have people apply, make our selections, and move forward with Zoom meetings. Sounds great, but that's not the way that I read this. Right now, it reads that basically we are going to pass the terms of reference, and we're going to basically put out advertisements for folks to show their level of interest, and then sit on those until a future state. So it would seem to me we need to make a revision.
Madam Clerk, could you clarify?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, right now we have a motion or a request to divide the motion. So if council wants to divide the motion, we can vote on the terms of reference, and then the remaining 2 paragraphs would be certainly open to amendment. Councillor Hahn is correct that many of our advisory committees, including the Committee of Adjustment and various other advisory committees, are meeting virtually at the present time, so that would be subject to amendment. The report as presented was the identical report that was presented to council earlier and postponed for later consideration. So the report was brought back in its entirety and it's in original form. So as members of council are aware, the pandemic is constantly moving and evolving. So there would be certainly opportunity to amend the last portion. So if we divide the motion, I could call the question on the terms of reference if council is wanting to move forward that way.
Yes, let's call the vote on the first part, and then we'll discuss the second.
So members of council, the motion has been divided. What you're voting on at this time is that council approve the terms of reference for the establishment of a Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee attached to the report. And this vote starts with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
So the first paragraph is carried. The remainder would then be subject to a separate vote that council directs staff to proceed with the advertisement for community members to apply for the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, and that the appointment of community members to the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee occur after the temporary provincial and municipal coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic restrictions on meetings of advisory committees has been lifted. So that portion of the motion is now open for discussion and amendment.
Okay, so question. First, we'll hear from the CAO. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Not used to living in a mute world. It's problematic for me personally. Just so that we're clear, Council, this was written back. You remember when coronavirus might extend the March break for a week. And it was in that context, it was the week after the March break, this got written and published and decided and on your agenda in very early April. So this was, those words made sense in the context of this coronavirus thing might be another 10 days or so, but it'll go away. And in hindsight, that seems quaint at best. But that's why it's worded the way it is. We simply haven't made any changes. The matter was deferred. It wasn't deferred to a specific date. We didn't know what to do with it, so it's back on your agenda. We're enormously happy with any direction you see fit to give, and it's entirely possible to run committee meetings through Zoom. Here we are proving council can be done. through Zoom. So we're very happy with any direction you see fit to give. Councillor Hahn is correct in that it's awkwardly worded, but it's awkwardly worded to 4 months later with a bunch of greater knowledge now. At the time, it made sense, and here we are. So staff are just looking forward to any direction with no particular preference on how to proceed.
Thank you. Any suggestions from councils then? Councillors. Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor, so then would we not just omit the last paragraph? So in other words, we're saying that the second paragraph is that council is going to proceed with advertising and then you can say and appointments, and then leave off the temporary restrictions and you're sitting on that for a while. We could just omit that. So in other words, yeah, let's move forward and have them do online meetings.
Madam Clerk, is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so that would be a motion to amend the resolution by striking the last paragraph, and it would need a second.
Is there a seconder? And I see Councillor Wink has his hand up. Any discussion on this motion as presented?
So this is on the motion to amend by striking the last paragraph.
Councillor Stewart?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my only concern with it is the Zoom meetings. The committees that I'm on, and indeed council, we've all had a chance to work together as teams before and not suddenly just, as a new council or a new committee had to work by Zoom. I think it will be difficult to get a committee working through Zoom at the very beginning.
I understand what you're saying, Councillor. I don't know how long the Garden Club or the Beautification Club has been together, but they have no qualms in getting together and learning the IT part of the business. Perhaps a valid concern, but I think in this day and age that most people will be able to figure the Zoom out and hold the meetings. That's my own feelings. Any other comments before we go for the vote? Okay, let's call the vote then, please, Madam Clerk.
Just so members of council are clear, this is on the amendment to strike the last paragraph. And this vote starts with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The amendment carries. So now we are back to the second paragraph that council directs staff to proceed with the advertisement for community members to apply for the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee. Is there any discussion on that through you, Mr. Mayor?
I'll ask councillors. Any discussion on the paragraph just read by the clerk? Not seeing any. We'll have her call the vote.
And this one starts with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried. So recognizing that there is a new item by Councillor Hildebrand, but the first under motions and notices of motion is the motion presented by Councillors Stewart and Hahn. And that reads as follows: be it resolved that council hereby authorizes a temporary provision under bylaw 4199 of 2020, section 9N, being a bylaw prohibiting and regulating signs in the town of Pelham so as to permit readograph mobile signs approved on a temporary basis to permit a total of 6 30-day periods throughout the remainder of the COVID-19 pandemic. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, discussion on this motion being brought forward. I guess I have one question, not seeing any other councilors, is because we're extending the period that the signs can be out there, would we be also increasing the fees that we gather for these signs? Any feelings on that? Mr. CAO?
Your Worship, the fees and services bylaw comes to council every year, and you deal with that separately. We're not able to, and we do not charge any amounts above or below what the fees and services bylaw says. That's actually set up. The Municipal Act calls for that, so we do it that way. And that's a question you can address the next time. We're working on the fees and services bylaw for next year.
Okay.
We'll be presenting to you in, Ms. Quinlan might have to help me with that. But before the end of the year, we'll present it to you for next calendar year. And that's the time when you can have some input into that one way or the other.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments on this?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a question?
Yes, of course.
For clarity, the way the bylaw reads is that you can have a sign for a 2-month period, twice a year for a total of 4 months. So is it what you're asking, just so I can instruct the officers, so you're going to allow a sign up to 2 months at a time, 3 times a year for a total of 6 months?
To the movers? Yes, Councillor Stewart?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's the intention. It would be an extension of up to 2 months, but the fee would apply to that 2 months. It wouldn't be a free ride.
Okay. That answer your question, Chief?
Yeah, I'm clear on the fee, just so that we don't get an application thinking they can apply for a sign for 3 months. The maximum is 2 months, but for 3 times a year for a total of 6 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions or debate on this motion? Councillor Wink?
I don't have an issue with the motion, but I think it's got to be a little more clear as outlined by the chief.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on this? This was moved, I'm sorry, by Councillor Stewart. So Councillor Stewart, would you mind perhaps clarifying or perhaps having the clerk draw something up, whatever, to clarify the intent just a little more, perhaps? So what is it what is it we're after then? I'll ask the fire chief this. What would you like to have it say?
Currently, it says you can apply for a sign for up to maximum of 60 days for twice a year. So there has to be a break in there, so we don't get signs on the highway on Highway 20 for like months and months on end. So if you were to say that we could increase that 60-day max to a 3-time-a-year period, then we can enforce it that way.
Okay. Councillor Stewart, any comment on that?
That sounds fine with me. That was my intention. I guess I didn't make it clear enough.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. My feelings on this is I will not support this motion. I don't know, just the reason we had the limit on these signs was that we didn't want Highway 20 to take on the appearance of Lundy's Lane with signs out on the street. I realize businesses have got to advertise to survive. There's other ways of doing it. You can either go on print, go social media, what have you. I really don't want to I really don't want to see our main street proliferated with signs from April or whatever, February till October. So I will not support this motion as it is. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a short-term effort to help some of the businesses that are struggling during the pandemic. We did, this is not going to really cost the town anything because there will be fees coming in if businesses choose to have those signs out. And we did offer assistance to the restaurants by allowing extra patio space. So I thought in light of the issues that a lot of the businesses are dealing with during the pandemic, it might help save some of our small businesses.
Yeah, yep, I appreciate that. I realize it's not going to cost the town anything. Anyway, I'm still not going to support it just because Highway 20 has enough signs on it as it is. To extend that period, whatever. I won't support it. Any other comments? Yep, Councillor Hahn?
Mr. Mayor, so the last portion is the remainder of the COVID-19 pandemic period. Knowing what we don't know, and that is quite a lot, this could be quite a long time, could be a shorter time, but do we want to put some parameters around that at all? Would that make a difference? And we just want to hear the thoughts, I guess, of some of the other councils. Because you've got national, you've got provincial, you've got regional, like there's lots of different parameters when it comes to COVID and what that period looks like.
Yeah. First of all, I got to tell you, Councillor, I'm really having trouble hearing your comments tonight. I don't know if you've done something to your mic or so I apologize for that. I have had time, and I believe the clerk has had somewhat of a hard time understanding you too. I just apologize for that. It's probably my hearing or something, but I have a hard time getting your comments tonight. So I really didn't get the gist of what you're saying, other than the fact that that you're obviously thinking that the businesses need this for the remainder of the COVID, however long that is. If you want to take another shot at it, you're more than welcome to. But I really, if other councillors can hear you, then it must be the sound system in here. But I'm just having a hard time, and I apologize for that.
So I'll try again then. So I just am wondering if we should be putting some parameters around when we say pandemic period, what that actually means.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What does that mean to the town of Pelham, right? Because there's lots of different meanings behind. It's very subjective, right? It's
yes.
Nationally, provincially, regionally, it all means something very different depending on who you're talking about, who you're asking. So if we want to define that a little bit more.
Yes, perhaps that would be excellent idea then. Excellent. So perhaps a date, a finishing on it. Perhaps is that's what you're hinting at, Councillor?
That's the gist of what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor, Mr. CAO.
If I might, to support council in this endeavor, you could link it to the expiry of the town's masking bylaw. One would assume you won't be passing a bylaw when there is no quote unquote emergency, taking Councillor Hahn's point at very good point at face value. And obviously we're periodically going to be reviewing that bylaw. You could associate one with the other, and then we'd have consistency, which is beneficial in many ways. Yes,
I believe that is a good step going forward. Councillor Stewart, what would you think of putting that as an addition that that this would last as long as the masking bylaw is in place? Are you satisfied with that? Do you consider that to be a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I'm agreeable with that.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, can we, any other discussion from any councillors on if we go that way as a time frame? I don't see any disagreements. Madam Clerk?
So through you, I've added the words as aligned with the town of Pelham face covering bylaw.
Okay. So perhaps we should, can you read the bylaw as it would stand then, please?
Be it resolved, the council hereby authorizes a temporary provision under bylaw 4199 of 2020, section 9N, being a bylaw prohibiting and regulating signs in the town of Pelham so as to permit readograph mobile signs approved on a temporary basis to permit a total of 6 30-day periods throughout the remainder of the COVID-19 pandemic period as aligned with the town of Pelham face covering bylaw. Council did provide clarity in the discussions, which staff will take as direction, that there would be a 60-day maximum, so 3 times a year, so that bylaw has the ability to clearly enforce that.
Everyone clear on what we're voting for then? And Councillor Stewart, are you happy with it as it stands now?
Yes, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wink, do I see your hand?
So through you, Mayor. So what I'm understanding is that we're going to leave the wording of the 6 30-day periods throughout the year and just give staff direction. I think the bylaw itself should say 3 times a year for 2 months at a time, as the chief suggested.
Madam
That
Clerk?
way there's no, like, if we're leaving it this way and giving staff direction, it's still a little cloudy.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor.
So if the councillor is making that a motion to amend, then I just need a seconder on that.
Yeah. Is there a seconder on,
To bring that clarity, is there a seconder on the motion by Councillor Wink to include the wordings 3 times a year for a maximum of 2 months at a time?
Okay.
Councillor Kaur, is that a second?
yes.
Yes.
So a vote on that amendment. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
That's carried. So now to the motion as amended. If there's no further discussion,
Any other discussion on the motion as amended?
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried unanimously as amended. Mr. Mayor, the next item of business is the new motion by Councillor Hildebrand. In order to consider that motion, he is presenting a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn, that pursuant to Section 25(4) of Bylaw 4107, 2019, being the town's procedural bylaw, that council dispense with notice requirements so as to permit a motion pertaining to the 2021 budget schedule to be presented for consideration on this agenda.
Any questions, comments on this motion? Not seeing any.
Just can't remember who I left off with. So, Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried unanimously. So the motion being presented by Councillor Hildebrand and seconded by Councillor Hahn, Whereas Council, at its regular meeting of June 15th of 2020, unanimously approved the 2021 budget schedule as amended to include the Audit Committee review in the schedule. And whereas Council is desirous to further amend the 2021 budget schedule so as to include a potential second round of COVID-19 funding from the provincial and/or federal levels of government. Now therefore be it resolved that Council rescind the resolution adopted at the June 15th, 2020 regular meeting of Council which approved the 2021 budget schedule, and that Council direct staff to revise the 2021 budget schedule to allow for the incorporation of further funding assistance to offset the costs of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to present an updated 2021 budget schedule at the next regular Council meeting scheduled for September 21st, 2020.
Okay. Discussion, comments on this motion brought forward by Councillor Hildebrand. Councillor Wink.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO or the Deputy Treasurer or the Treasurer. How realistic is it that we will get a second round, and what second round of funding, and, you know, how realistic of a date would it be to have an indication that we're going to receive the funds? Like, are we going to receive the funds in June of next year or whatever, which holding up the budget process is not desirable if it's going to be delayed any length of time.
I see the Director of Finance, and then we will go to the CAO. Ms. Quinlan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, from right now, what we're hearing from the area treasurers is that the phase 2 of the COVID funding, that is due by the end of October. So what they're saying is we would hear back from the ministry before the end of this fiscal year, the amount. So regardless of when they pay it out, once they announce what the amount is, if we get any more, then we would accrue for it. So that doesn't impact the actual receipt of cash doesn't impact the budget. But they're saying that we should hear something by the end of the fiscal year. That's what I heard. So I don't know if the CEO has heard something different from his counterparts.
Mr. CAO?
No, my information aligns with Ms. Quinlan's. So to be clear, there is a second round of funding. Will we get 0 or 300,000 or 400,000? We can't say. We are still working on our application. It's a fair bit of work to gather together this one. It requires a lot of evidentiary basis, but we'll be filing that before the deadline. And we're happy to comply with your instructions. I guess my general commentary is that staff have to keep working. A budget is hundreds of hours at the staff level to get to you in workable format. It's and accordingly, and we base our year around when we do this work, and we're doing the work as we speak. So we wouldn't want to change the, we've committed publicly through advertising that later this month on the 23rd, we're doing an open house to get some public input on next year's budget, give the public a direct opportunity. We've committed to producing budget documents to this council, so at least you have something to read, and that we think accurately reflects the amount of money needed to run the corporation next year in its 3 different phases or regards, the 3 budgets, and to providing those to, as is your direction, and has also been the preference of the Finance and Audit Committee, to get those documents to them on the scheduled timeline so they can offer you some advice as a collective. Now, beyond that, everything else is flexible. There is no law requiring you to pass budgets this calendar year. There is a default corporate approach where we feel doing that allows us to get better pricing out in the market for the big ticket items we purchase, which tends to be services or goods. That being said, obviously greater information, to Ms. Quinlan's point, if we knew how much we were getting, if we figure that out somewhere in the month of December, or if it takes them longer into January, that will have a material impact, one would think, on your approach to budgeting next year. whether you're starting in the hole or starting at an even keel is a very different proposition. So we're able to comply with this. We'll bring you back a more detailed document for your next meeting. But I think what we would strongly suggest, of course, is that we honor the public meeting later this month, and we honor the dates to provide you with the work, because we're working on it. What we're really talking about is the difference in amount of the source of funding, i.e., and how much would come from the local levy or not. But the fundamental analysis of how much is needed to run the corporation probably isn't dependent on that. So there's sort of two separate questions. So I think we can comply with both.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Wink.
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So right now the motion seems to be a little open-ended, like it can happen anytime next year. What if we extended it a month? Would that impact anything that the town is doing or is going to do?
We'll go to the Director of Finance, Ms. Quinlan.
Well, the capital budget is the one that we'd like to approve first because of procurement. So that's the one that once we let Public Works, who has the biggest capital budget, know what's been approved, they can move forward with the procurement process and go ahead and get some better pricing. We are, as the CEO has mentioned, we are flexible. I mean, our goal is, we're still going to stick to our timeline as far as we want to bring council, a point where you can see where we're at. This is where the budget's at. This is how much we have left from COVID. If we get the funding, it'll wipe this out. If we don't get the funding, then we have a different story. But at least you'll know what that number is. And I think that's what's important for council, at least to know. We don't expect you to make a decision on approving the budget unless you know that information. We agree with you on that. But we feel it's important that we bring you the most up-to-date information on a more timely basis, which is what our schedule reflects.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Quinlan. Councilor Wink?
Yeah, I appreciate your comments. I go back to the motion and say it's so open-ended that we've got to have at some point in time a definitive date when this is going to be approved. And I can't accept the motion the way it sits.
Councillor Hildebrand, would you be willing to put some timelines to your motion?
Because I don't know when the amount's going to be approved, I, as a councillor, don't want to approve a final tax budget till I know how much that money is coming in. I agree with the capital part of the budget, but the final tax bill is going to be determined when we know what we're getting from the governments I support. And I, as a councillor, will not approve that until I have that date and that information.
Any other, perhaps Mr. CAO, do I see you wanting to speak?
The Municipal Act requires us to pass our budget. I can't remember if it's March 31st or April 1st, but let's face it, there's only 24 hours in there. So we have to have it done by then anyway. And I don't mean to be flippant. We really don't want it to wait till March. That would be very damaging in all sorts of ways. But we would bring you language next week that hopefully that gives us a few days to put our thinking caps on. I can tell you that earlier this evening, you dealt with a Heritage Advisory Committee, and that was deferred without a timeline. So we brought that report back to you. And although one sentence in the recommendations no longer made sense, basically you approved the terms of reference, they still worked. So the analogy here is hopefully the budget will still work. And if you get it in October and you don't make a decision until January, probably all of it's still going to work. And maybe there'll be some verb tenses that are wrong, but basically the work product will still be valid, we think. We would we put the Heritage Advisory piece on tonight's agenda because it was in purgatory and we didn't know what to do with it. We would have a strong incentive to try to put this on an agenda in January to try to encourage a January decision. That's losing about a month for some of the items that we normally feel is advantageous to the corporation and thereby the taxpayer. But certainly, at least then we could have a very focused conversation in January of getting it done in January or having to push it into February if absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, the 446,000 we initially got, whether it be a month ago or whatever, that was, I believe, based on a per capita basis. So that was set. So you knew what St. Catharines was going to get. We got the same per capita. Now the second round, from what I understand, is you have to justify the expense. It's going to be strictly on us gathering as many receipts as we can and saying, okay, this is what COVID has cost me. Is that a correct assumption, Ms. Quinlan?
Yes, it's on a different basis. The first one was based on households, the number of households, and that's how the calculation was done. So the 444 municipalities all received something in the first round. The second round has different criteria, and the cutoff is September 30th, and we have to report on expenses incurred up to September 30th. So there's a criteria that we're working through, and we definitely have to be able to justify the numbers.
Okay. Okay. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you. Any other comments on this, on the motion put forward as it stands? Or does anyone want to put forward an amendment to be voted on, or how does council want to proceed on this?
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, I'll go turn to the clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, just to bring some clarity to the councillor's question, the last paragraph of the motion does indicate that staff will bring back a revised budget schedule so that the approval wouldn't stand open-ended. There would be another schedule to be approved by council once staff has had an opportunity to further review the next funding announcements and how they can work that into the budget schedule. So there would be a new budget schedule coming forward on the 21st for council to consider.
No, with all due respect, there won't be, because we're not learning anything magic in the next week.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, the way the motion was presented to me was that an updated budget schedule be presented at the next September 21st council meeting. I'm just reading how the motion
already
reads.
heard the commentary. We will not know more 7 days from now. Not even 7 days from now, we'll have to publish that. We will not know more to give a specific timeline to change, because as it stands right now, this is the timeline we've endorsed and you've endorsed. We will not have extra information to be able to give you something to stand behind, because we still don't know, as Councillor Hildebrand says, exactly where we're getting that information. So we will not be able to add specificity to those pieces.
So then, for clarity, the way the motion stands right now, then, Mr. CAO, would you say then that you will not be bringing forth another budget schedule as if this motion until after you have learned the amount of the second round of funding? Is that how you would clarify this?
A document we can reasonably bring back has some dates that I think we need, that we're going to suggest to you we need to adhere to. Public meeting, presenting budgetary documents to yourselves and the public, of course, and thirdly, the budget to the Finance and Audit Committee. I think those things have to be set in stone. I think they're too late to change, and they recognize the workflow that your administration is engaged in. Everything else, I think, is negotiable and is ultimately subject to your control. And so it would sort of set out, 3 or 4 week periods We can't be more specific on anything else if the triggering event is a funding announcement from a third party.
Yes. Yeah, that you don't know, obviously, when's going to occur. Yes. Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. One of the comments I did receive from the treasurer was she was willing to put a date of the first quarter on the schedule. Now, maybe
Right.
that was approved an acceptable date to council, but that's one of the comments that was raised. Maybe our director would like to make a comment on that date.
Ms. Quinlan?
I think what we can put in, and I haven't had a chance to talk to the CAO, we could put on the schedule that, we'll bring forward the budget to be approved once we hear about the funding announcement. Can we do that, David? And then we
do that, at least it's a triggering event.
Yeah. So once we, so let's say that the funding announcement is on, January 10th, and the next council meeting, we will bring forward the final approval of the budget. But I agree with the CAO that we need to move forward and to complete at least up to October 28th, where we, have the complete operating water, wastewater, and capital budgets binders done, at least for council to start looking at it, and for the Finance and Audit Committee, which we have 2 external members that are waiting and looking forward to, providing their comments on the budget as well. So I'm fine with that, to put that asterisk to say that, the final approval will be, presented once we have that funding made on the phase 2 of the COVID relief.
Councillor Hildebrand?
I agree with the comments from the treasurer. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we can move ahead, and the final approval of the budget will come to council after the second round funding announcement then, Councillor? And yes, okay, excellent. Mr. CAO, are you happy with that schedule?
Well, happy is never a relevant consideration. That's the proper execution of one's duties. But I think we can bring you something workable.
Yes.
My point is it will not have specificity. And I think Clerk Pizzato, Treasurer Quinlan, and I are in agreement on that. We understand what you're looking for. We'll deliver as much of it as we can. And we'll just, this is going to be a unique year. We'll just have to react to that major event.
Okay, great, thank you. Back to Madam Clerk and the final motion.
So if there's no further discussion, there were no amendments made, so I will call the question, starting with Councillor Wink.
So can you read the motion again then?
Yes.
To be clear?
Certainly. On a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Whereas Council at its regular meeting of June 15th, 2020 unanimously approved the 2021 budget schedule as amended to include the Audit Committee review in the schedule. And whereas Council is desirous to further amend the 2021 budget schedule so as to include a potential second round of COVID-19 funding from the provincial and/or federal levels of government. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council rescind the resolution adopted at June 15th regular meeting of Council which approved the 2021 budget schedule, and that Council direct staff to revise the 2021 budget schedule to allow for incorporation of further funding assistance to offset the costs of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to present an updated 2021 budget schedule at the next regular meeting scheduled for September 21st, 2020. Staff does, through the discussion, understand that it may not have specific dates, but it would be an updated schedule so that we're not tied to the dates that are already in the schedule.
So the last sentence about staff providing something to council on the 21st does not apply then. So I'd like to make an amendment to strike that.
Councillor Hildebrand, it's your motion. Do you consider that to be a friendly amendment?
No, I don't. I'd like to stick with the motion as presented.
So Just for clarification, Councillor Hildebrand, you're expecting staff to provide a report on the 21st.
That's correct.
Then I can't support it.
Thank you. Any other questions or amendments before we call the vote? Not seeing any. Guess we're ready for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Wink?
No.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
No.
The vote carries. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes.
So just point of clarification, how many votes are needed to, essentially we're rescinding something that we've approved. How many votes are required to do that?
Is that 2/3?
Thank you. That would be considered a point of order. And actually, the CAO did have this discussion, and it would be a 2/3 vote, which I believe, Mr. Cribbs, we agreed would be in this case 5. And this was a 4-2 vote.
Any comment on that, Mr. CAO?
So council, so that you understand it as it sounds like a technicality, but you're a group of 6 at the moment, which means you need 4 to pass anything because a tie is a defeat. The underlying notion to all your procedural rules is that when you make a decision, the decision is set so that society, staff, everyone has certainty that something's been decided and we carry on with our business. It's designed to be hard to undo your decisions. And so that normally you need then a 2/3 majority. 2/3 of 6, which is why you never have even numbered councils, right? Ever. It's always an odd number so that you can't get stuck with this. If you can undo your decisions at 4, then you've never really made a permanent decision. It isn't any harder. It has to be 5. And unanimity is sort of absurd, right? So really, when you want to undo your decisions, until you become a council of 7, I think, in fact, I think it's always the case here, you need 5.
Thank you for that clarity. So, Madam Clerk?
So if it's 5, then I would stand to be corrected on the point of order and the motion would be lost.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may.
Councillor, sorry, Mr. Cribbs.
So as to avoid a procedural morass, your staff have heard and very much understand why you do not wish to make a decision until we hear about round 2 of the funding, which will have an enormous impact on tax increases, if any, for next year. We are still scheduled to do up to October 28th, as we've discussed, Ms. Quinlan and I have both identified. Notwithstanding the fact that maybe you can't, or you've just fallen short of being able to unring your bell, that doesn't force you to pass budgets in timelines you don't agree with, right? You can always choose not to. So we will behave in a manner that clearly interprets your desire not to make those final decisions until such time as we hear back from the province. That said, we do have a schedule to work forward on. So we will bring you documents, you will have stuff to discuss and review. We can respect both needs. So that this isn't a defeat for anyone or a victory for anyone. We will go forward. And really it changes nothing from the staff perspective and the corporate perspective between now and October 28th. Hopefully by October 28th, we have some better idea on timelines, because we are not alone. There are 444 municipalities in Ontario, and every one of us needs to understand what phase 2 is like to address their budgetary needs. So the province and the federal government understand that. that they've got 444 other governments waiting on them. So I'm sure they feel a lot of pressure, and will increasingly so. So this won't cause chaos. We have a clear path forward, but we can respect both schools of thought.
So if I could just also add that I think it was a very worthwhile discussion we had tonight anyway, and it clarified a few points that, and I think council can think back to the last budgets we've done. They've taken a long time. They've taken, whether it be 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So I personally am glad. It's a win-win here. Number one, the staff can keep going, so they can present us with preliminary figures towards the end of the year, whether it be November, December, and at the same time, Councillor Hildebrand and all of us really, we really can't make that final decision on a tax levy until we have it could be a substantial number, but I honestly don't think it's going to be substantial, but whatever. It's still nice. It's going to be nice to have that figure. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's a win-win. We can keep going forward. Staff can. They can bring us the preliminary, and then we hang on. Once we get that figured, we're not going to be passing anything until we hear from the government. So. It was a good discussion. Everybody, I think, has benefited from it. So, thank you, Councillor Hildebrand, for bringing this forward and for bringing it to everybody's attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the resolution to move into closed session, moved by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following, pursuant to the Municipal Act, Section 239(2)D, Labor Relations and Employee Negotiations, one item. And for the vote, Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried. If members of council will just give us a few moments to ensure that the live streaming is ending, and we will proceed as we advise.